Welcome to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast, where our goal is to connect listeners to the great outdoors with hosts Brian Hoffmeyer and Ben Brandell.
I'm host Ben Brandell, owner of Meant to Be Outdoors, instructor of outdoor skills, and passionate about personal growth.
I'm host Brian Hoffmeyer, wildlife biologist and avid outdoorsman. Welcome back to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast. It is another Myth Monday episode, and today we're going to be talking about reptiles. Specifically, we're going to be talking about lizards and different kinds of lizards. This is actually a requested episode by one of our listeners. So Bryce, thank you for making this request. Bryce requested that we talk about blue-tailed skinks. So we're going to be talking about them today. That's a very common species here where we live. But we're going to relate it to everybody no matter where you live. So stay tuned for that. Ben, what is it about blue-tailed skinks that is so enamoring? Because I can remember being a kid and always trying to catch them. And now, obviously, something that we're getting asked about. So what is it about this blue-tailed skink?
You know, while growing up, flipping rocks, flipping dead trees, lifting them up, looking around, exploring, you would see these beautiful blue-tailed lizards.
Yeah, calling it a skink. So I guess what's the myth?
That's where we're at. I mean, growing up, I didn't even know the word skink.
Right.
It wasn't something that I was ever taught or even used. It was skink is like a slang for skunk. After the skunk sprayed, it skinked you.
It skinks.
Yeah. I just never heard of the word.
I think that's slang you just made up.
It is. I'd never heard of it before. It was a lizard. So, when I saw this little tiny blue-tailed lizard, that's exactly what it was. But they always kind of spooked me because of how they look. First thought it was snake,
Right.
Little tiny snake. But their coloration is beautiful.
Yeah, I think for me that is the most enamoring thing when you see that bright blue tail. It's just to see bright blue in the wild. You just don't see many things that are bright blue, especially where we're at. We don't have parrots. We've got a blue jay is blue, but it's even a brighter blue than that. And so to see that color running around on the ground real fast, usually.
And that's what I was going to say. Like that first, I'm like, it looks like a snake, but in a moment's notice, how quickly they move left, right, up, down on the side of a log. They're fast. It's
right.
impressive.
So to be specific, we are talking about lizards, and we're calling this a blue-tailed skink. So the myth is a skink a lizard? Is a lizard a skink?
Right. The answer is that all skinks are lizards, but not all lizards are skinks.
Correct. So there is a difference between a true lizard and a skink, but a skink is a lizard.
Correct.
So let's try to explain that to everybody.
Let's try.
You want me to try to explain it, or you want to go ahead?
Go ahead. You go right ahead.
So basically what that means, there are differences between these animals. They're very, very, very similar, meaning they're both lizards. They both have scales and basically the same body anatomy. They have the same the same types of habitats. They eat the same food. They reproduce the same ways. Generally, biologically, they're very similar. However, there are a few differences. So they kind of have their own family. Most lizards or anoles are going to be in the Dactyloidae family, and then you have skinks, which are in the Skinkidae family. It's a very fitting name, right? So they are very, very, very closely related, but a little bit different. So let's tell what the differences are. A skink is going to look like a lizard, snake-like reptile with scales, long, skinny tail, but they have legs, some of them. There actually are legless species as well. And what makes a legless species of lizard different than a snake is that they have ear openings and eyelids, whereas snakes don't have either of those. So while it may look like a snake, it's actually a true lizard. And even here in Missouri, we have a species of that called the glass lizard.
Right.
I've never seen one in the wild, though.
I've only seen them in captivity, and they're awesome. I would like to add also to that when I see a skink, it actually kind of reminds me more of a salamander because of how short its legs are, kind of where it's found. Because when I now that I identify what a lizard has those longer legs,
right?
And you can just see the difference. So
that is one of the biggest differences is the length of the leg between a skink and a lizard.
Right, and so that skink looks to me more like an amphibian, even though it is a reptile, 100%.
Right. And they're going to be, generally skinks, compared to a true lizard, are going to be a little bit longer and more slender. And they're still scaled, but they kind of have that sheen, that shiny scale, like more like a snake. Whereas most true lizards that you're going to see, we'll say like I'm trying to think of an example that most people, a bearded dragon. That's one that we've worked with a lot. It's a big lizard. They're kind of rough, got that rough, almost prehistoric dinosaur type look and texture to them. Whereas a skink is going to be slick and lean.
Yeah, there a lot of people describe it by the neck.
Yeah.
So like skinks, they just say don't have a neck.
Yeah.
It's that, yeah.
So like a bodybuilder where their trap touches. Yeah.
Exactly. Like there's not a lot of neck there,
Right. Oh, no neck.
So if that helps when you're out exploring and looking. But the 5-line skink is something that I see a lot.
Okay, so now you're bringing in 5-line skink.
Uh-oh.
So there's kind of another myth underlying there. We said this episode is about skinks and lizards, and we're talking about the blue-tailed skink because that was really the requested species. However, most people call it the blue-tailed lizard, and that is actually only native to Australia.
Oh.
So we don't actually have blue-tailed lizards here, and the blue-tailed skink, which we're talking about here in the Ozarks, is that's just a common name for a 5-lined skink. The true name for that animal is a 5-lined skink, not a blue-tailed lizard, and not a blue-tailed skink. They actually, when they get big, they don't have blue tails. So when they grow up to be older, mommies and daddy lizards, they don't have blue tails like they do. If you're seeing a blue-tailed skink, it's because they're juvenile.
Wow. Do we know if that's male or female on that side?
So as they get older, their colorations will be different, and you can start to distinguish male and female. But in that juvenile state, it's a little tougher.
Gotcha.
One of the most amazing things about all lizards and skinks, even some salamanders, is how they protect themselves, because they are a prey for a lot of things. One of the coolest species around here that you don't see very often, just of animals in general, is a roadrunner. And I can remember watching a roadrunner fly down a gravel road in front of my truck, and
They fly?
They do fly.
So you said fly down. Was it flying at the time? Or
It was kind
running?
of doing like you ever seen a chicken that wants to fly and it's running? It was kind of doing that. And it was going after a lizard. It was going after a eastern fence lizard, and it grabbed that thing off the road. And I thought, man, that's a rough life. You're just trying to cross the road and you get snagged up. So they need something to help protect them because they're small little animals and they're very susceptible to being eaten. So,
well, this is one thing. My son's asked me, what animals bite, and I get this all the time, and I'm like, well, his name is Bodie. I say Bodie.
That's the most common question when we teach animal programs in front of a classroom of students. Does it bite?
Does it bite?
Yeah.
And I'm like, Bodie, if it has a mouth, if anything has
Absolutely.
a mouth, it can absolutely bite. And that is one thing that I have actually seen lizards and skinks do is handling them. That is one form of defense. It's not the best, but they will bite. And does it hurt? Well, that's depending on your tolerance. But
there's a wives' tale out there. If a lizard bites you, it's not going to let go till it thunders.
I thought that was the snapping turtle. So now I'm so confused. But again, that is a defense bite, and they will bite. I don't believe it hurts. Didn't hurt me, but they do bite. So that is but it gets even cooler than that. So when you're talking about how do they evade and protect themselves from predators, what is it?
Right.
What do they do?
Because their bite isn't, even the big bearded dragons and stuff, like they may draw blood or scratch, but a little small lizard, it's bite you, it's barely going to feel like a pinch. So that's not a very effective defense. So the best thing, and people that have tried to catch them have probably seen this, if you get a hold of them by their tail, they are going to detach their tail from their body. And it's kind of crazy because this tail it doesn't just fall off and just sit there. This thing thrashes around and wraps. Sometimes it'll even coil around your finger. And the whole premise of this is that if let's say a roadrunner was trying to catch a lizard and it got it by the tail as it was trying to get away, well, it gets left with this thrashing tail in its mouth, and that can distract this roadrunner long enough to think, oh man, I got something. I got it right here. Oh, well, now this lizard's gone under a rock and the roadrunner lost his meal. But is the tail gone forever?
Well, I mean, that tail is. It's in
that one is.
It's in the belly of
that
something.
One definitely is
It's gone. But can they regrow them back? Yeah, that's kind of the idea. That's
That's the amazing part of it.
It is I think the most amazing part is that it sets and thrashes and wiggles without the body. You know, and then the second most amazing part is that skink can begin to regrow its tail.
Right. It can regrow it several times over its life. You know, it's not exactly the same tail it was before. A lot of times, especially with the coloration, you're talking about these blue tails. When it grows back, it's not going to be as bright and colorful. So it will be more dull, and that goes for most species. And also, it's more cartilage filled. It's not even really structured the same as it was before. So it's almost like a placeholder for the original tail. It doesn't grow back. It's going to have the skin and the blood vessels and things like that, but it doesn't have any of the spinal structure that it originally had. It's just kind of cartilage, almost like if we cut our nose off and regrew our nose.
Yeah, and we were talking about juveniles earlier, so, babies. That's actually something interesting that I found is that mamas don't take care of their babies. So basically after they hatch, these skinks, lizards, they're on their own.
Right.
From the littlest of littles. So that's why having that tail that they can lose and be able to evade and escape from is so powerful for their life, their survival, because they don't have any help. They're on their own.
Right. So let's talk. You mentioned hatched. Let's talk about some lizard and skink generalities just overall, because I think they're an amazing group of animals. So just to kind of give people some understanding about them, some things that they may not know, there are over 2,500 different lizard species in the world. In North America, here in the United States, we have 155 of those species. But here in Missouri, where we live, we only have 13. We only have 13 of those species. Something that's very common amongst all lizard species is that they are very reclusive, meaning they don't like to be caught. They're not very friendly. They are going to hide and try to get away. So a lot of the species, even here in Missouri, we have 13. I'm a biologist. I've worked in all kinds of field studies. I have not seen all 13 species that we have here in the state.
I don't even think I've seen probably actually studying this, talking to you, talking about your experiences and some of the ones you've seen. I've maybe only seen 5.
Yeah.
I haven't seen hardly any of them. It's crazy.
I mentioned my favorite that we had, and you're like, what? What is that? I just saw one this past weekend. I mentioned it, and you're like, what is that? And you looked it up, and you're like, I had no idea that was there. And if you're listening to this, I recommend you look it up. If you're local here in the Ozarks, this was once an endangered species, but it's now rebounding because of habitat work. But it's called the eastern collared lizard. And when you see this thing, it's much larger than most of our species. They get like 14 to 16 inches long. They are beautiful, bright blue and green colored, almost like the Ozarks iguana or something.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, when you showed it to me, I wanted to be like, you ain't from around here.
Right.
It almost looks like maybe, what do you call it when... like our boa constrictors, like when people are purchasing these animals and they let them go.
Oh, it looks like somebody's domesticated that they let go.
Yeah, like it just doesn't belong here. It's beautiful.
Yeah, they're a native species. They're beautiful, but a lot of these, and I mentioned I've never seen the glass lizard, but my point is these are reclusive. They're hard to see. The most common one is the one we kind of highlighted in this episode, and that is the 5-line skink, or commonly known as the blue-tailed skink.
Right.
That is the most common one. Another one that we see a lot, we got a cool video of the other day at the river. It kind of became our friend and didn't want to leave us, which was kind of peculiar for a lizard, but we had something black and warm for him to lay on, and I think that's what he really attached to. But it is a eastern fence lizard. That's a very small, brown little, but you'll see if you're to compare those, that's kind of more of a true lizard. It's got the rough scales.
Longer legs.
Right,
definitely
longer
can tell
legs.
that head and that neck. But it was maybe 2 inches long. I mean, it just wasn't very long.
But those are the two most common.
Right.
Here where we are, for sure.
Now, with the 5-line skink, though, I found out that they are endangered in Ontario, Canada. So,
really?
Here we have them everywhere. They're, again, it's one of the ones you're going to see the most. But,
do you know the distribution of them in North America? Are they pretty much across the whole United States?
I don't. I'm thinking about Ontario, Canada, that they are endangered because of the habitat loss they were talking about, because it is illegal to take them home. So if you found them in Ontario, Canada, thinking, back in the Ozarks where I live, we see them all the time, we can take them and do whatever.
Right.
It is illegal to do that there. So, as you head farther north, it sounds like that range becomes lower and smaller and smaller.
Okay, I just looked it up here as we're talking, and it looks like basically from mid Texas, mid Oklahoma, mid Kansas, all the way to the east coast of the United States, and then up into southern Canada. That's pretty much their distribution. So pretty much just the eastern part of North America is going to be your blue-tailed skink. So a lot of you that are listening to this probably know exactly what we're talking about and have seen them before because they're very common. I want to mention that you mentioned hatch. I want to talk about that for a second. So most, like most reptiles, most lizards are going to lay eggs and let them hatch out. But there are actually a few species that have live birth. So it's just so crazy to me. Out of 2,500 species, why most of them lay eggs and then some don't. And, like most scientists, we can't answer everything. We can just take interest in it, and I think that's very peculiar. So some of them do give live birth. Pretty much all lizard species across the world, their main diet is going to be insects and small invertebrates and things like that. But there are actually a couple species that eat plants. And so it's like, why are there always these? It just seems like there's always the exception, always the outlier. It's never just like, there's reptiles, and you can say this about every reptile, but there's just something different about all of them. And I think that's why in the science world, you always have classifications and families and naming schemes. It's always changing. It's just this fluid thing because we're always learning. Science is knowledge. So as we gain knowledge and more of these things get new names. But for now, a skink is a skink, which is also a lizard, but a lizard is not a skink.
That's right. To add in, you asked that question, why is there exceptions to every rule? And on my journey in this life, I feel like the answer is that because the moment that we think we as man have it figured out, we want to be glorified as we are the ones that figured it out and we have this control and have this understanding, when in reality, we don't. We don't have understanding in everything. And the moment that any man on earth thinks that they do, they crumble and fall. Like we as humans, we don't have it figured out. And I don't think we ever will. And I think that's why we're supposed to glorify God in that, because he is the one that has all the answers and we don't. But it also leads to fun discoveries,
It does.
If you go in thinking that every animal is the same, that's boring. You're going to find your one-offs that make it exciting and again, make you realize that you don't have all the answers.
You don't. And we won't.
And we won't.
We won't until we're with him.
That's right.
And then we probably aren't going to care about all the answers.
Then it won't matter.
We've been starting off lately just giving thanks for things, and we didn't really do that at the beginning of this episode, so we're going to end with that today, and I don't want that to escape us. I just want to give thanks for all the people that are showing interest. We've done 2 Myth Mondays now of request. And that is amazing to us that people would reach out to Ben and Ryan and request info from us. So we're very thankful for that. If you want to, the best way is to find us on one of our social accounts, Facebook, Instagram. Send us a message on there. We will find that. Or you can actually find our email address on our website as well, meanttobeoutdoors.com, and send us that request. So we're thankful for those coming in. We're hopefully helping other people learn too, not just the people that requested it. So, Ben, do you want to add anything to that, or?
Yeah, thank you for listening. It takes time to listen. It takes time to download. Even if you're mowing the lawn while you listen, even if you're just driving in the car, you are actively engaging with us, and that means a lot. And I just can't thank you enough. So thank you.
Yeah, there's so many things asking for our attention in today's world.
Right.
So I think even if just one person listened to our podcast, I would be thankful for that, because they were giving their attention to what we feel like God has put on our heart to share. That is going to be it for this episode of this Myth Monday podcast. We hope you guys have an understanding about lizards and skinks now, that all skinks are lizards, but not all lizards are skinks. We hope that if you have blue-tailed skinks where you live, you understand that there truly are a 5-line skink, and that because of some of the cool facts that we shared about lizards in general, you have a better appreciation for God's creation.
And I'll add in this, that it's okay to say lizard. So you'll never be wrong to say lizard. So if you say skink and you have that information, great. But if you just start calling them all lizards, you're good.
You're good. That's the safe bet. If it has 4 legs and scales, call it a lizard. Right? All right. Well, guys, thank you for listening to this episode of the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast. Please follow along and download on whatever platform you're listening to. We'd love for you to leave us a review. If you want to support the podcast, find us on Patreon. There is a link tree in each of our social media accounts that you can go to that Patreon. We would love for you to support us that way. We hope that you find time to go outdoors and maybe find a skink or lizard. Thank you for listening to the Meant to Be Outdoors podcast, hosted by Brian Hoffmeyer and Ben Brandell. Please help us by subscribing. Also, follow along on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook.